Hey, this is Courtney from TechRaptor, and I am here with
Miles Luna
and Gray Haddock
of Rooster Teeth.
Of Rooster Teeth, yeah. So Miles here is the writer and co-director on RWBY, and I'm a co-director and the head of Rooster Teeth Animation.
Yeah.
Okay, so first off, I did want to talk to you guys about the board game that you have coming out that is currently being funded on Kickstarter.
Yeah, so the game is called RWBY Combat Ready, and it is Rooster Teeth's first sort of venture into the making of board games. We've teamed up with Arcane Wonders to put the game together, and the game itself is a pretty focused. It's mainly focused on like the combat, as the name implies, of the show. What it's like to be in a fight with one of the villains or one of the Grimm or something from RWBY, and working together as a team to overcome that. So it's a cooperative. It's a cooperative game where you're fighting against an enemy deck, and we've had the pleasure of doing like a handful of test games with it, and we're pretty damn excited for this thing to come out.
Yeah, I think it captures the sort of rhythm of the action of the show really well.
Yeah. I know there's some fans that were like, in Volume 2 we had this giant big like Risk-style, super in-depth board game. That's a maybe one-day goal right now, but for now, this is the kind of thing that we were hoping that people can play a few rounds in one sitting, and you can mix things up by switching out like different villain decks or characters, and we've got a lot of other like stretch goals that we're hoping to hit now that we've officially been kickstarted. Yeah. And it's been so cool. Once again, our fan base is just incredibly supportive, and the fact that we're already funded, we couldn't be happier about it and more thankful for. So yeah, we're really looking forward to it.
So why'd you guys decide to go with the board game? Why not, another video game like Grim Eclipse?
Well, our video game department is working on stuff all the time. Right now, another RWBY video game just didn't seem, since we already have one out there, we want to try and, we want to try new stuff.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. It's something that Rooster Teeth hadn't done before.
Yeah.
One of the barometers we use at Rooster Teeth to see whether or not we should venture into a new, activity or market or product type is what is it that we love doing in our own lives that we haven't figured out how to do yet at the company. And there's a great tabletop gaming community inside of Rooster Teeth that gets together twice a week, evenings after work. I mean, they hang out at the office and do their gaming and whatnot, and it just kind of occurred to us as much like on the video game side of things, we didn't do video games for the longest time, but so much of our culture enjoys video games, so we said, okay, fine, RWBY Grim Eclipse is a great place to start that effort, build a team around it. We just realized that, it's time for us to start making some board games. The company, we've been kind of ramping up the effort. We put out our card game called $1 Million, but a year ago, I guess?
I think so.
Yeah, I guess it was last summer.
A year or two.
Yeah. And the fans were so generous in their response to that, and it's a really fun design game that now we want to try and do something a little bit bigger scale. So.
Okay. And also, you mentioned about the stretch goals.
Mm-hmm.
You guys came out with a revamped set of stretch goals somewhat recently. What was the reason behind that?
I actually don't know, and I don't know what they are, because I'm not really on that team. I just kind of write the show. I remember when they put out the stretch goals, I was like, okay, cool. I think I remember something about more intense figurines or something.
I can't speak as to if they've been shifting anything around, but what I do know is that we got a team that is very dedicated to the project, and they also want to make sure that both RWBY fans as well as casual tabletop gaming fans also just think this would be a fun game to play, even if you do or don't know the show. In terms of what the stretch goals are, the different levels will go ahead and increase like the build quality of the game. I know that like on the low end there's some stuff like better card stock and UV coding and things like that, which I know it's not terribly sexy for marketing purposes, but the gamers really appreciate the higher quality, more durable stuff that's going to last. I know that they want to go for cooler looking stylized plastic pieces. It's like for the markers and the counters and the things like that. They want the visual presentation of it to be as slick and pretty as possible. So some of the upgrades related to that. And then there's The base level indicators for the characters are just little cardboard cutouts. But did they not unlock the figurines?
I don't know, but I definitely think it was one of those.
I think at the time I thought it happened.
Cool. Because
we're in the miniatures business now. Which would be really cool. It's also kind of a neat way from my point of view. It's like I'll really enjoy having the game, but I'm also really honestly I'm going to like having these little 1 to 2 inch tall mini figurines of the RWBY castle on my desk too. So. But
Any plans to sell those separately?
I don't know. That's an excellent question. Somebody should think about that.
I mean, I'd buy them.
Yeah, good to know.
So, oh my God, I had another question about the game and now it's totally flown out my head.
Oh, it's all good.
Okay, unless I remember it, in which case our audio guy is going over this, so he just got them in order. So my next question was going to be, I want to know about the influence that video gaming has had on RWBY, because it's very clearly, there are a lot of influences from different video games, different genres, and just the way stories are told in video games and the way things are animated. And really, there's not a whole lot of shows out there that do that. So, I just wanted to talk to you guys about, kind of like the different process, since video games do have a different storytelling process, and how that was translating it to animation and like.
Yeah, no. Video games have infected us at many different levels of production. From at its simplest, gaming is how a large part of the crew takes their breaks. And in fact, I've heard. I did a little of it myself, but in particular, I remember the stories of like Monty. Whenever he was taking a break, he would sit there and play video games, and whoever he was brainstorming with at the time, then he'd hand you the other controller, and you guys are, thinking about the next thing for the show at the same time as he's beating the crap out of you in some fighting game. And in fact, one of the games that Monty had grown up on and we'd played around the office was Blade Blue, which is the game now that we're in partnership with on Arc System Wars, which is fairly mind-blowing, and I hope that Monty, wherever he is, gets a kick out of that. And I know for a fact that Monty would study some of the more elaborate combat games and get ideas from moves from those, or wanted to make sure that his moves were at least as good as what he saw in the game. So I know that they were both, they served as many different types of inspiration for him.
The character's aura in the show was definitely inspired by like the overshield in Halo. We have health bars, dust and mana, and we all grew up with video games, and it's no surprise that it has affected pretty much everything we touch. Even down to like super specific stuff like the Vital Festival tournament. The battlefield was definitely inspired by the Pokemon Stadium Arena in Super Smash Brothers, and I don't think we're like shy about it or anything. We think video games are awesome, and we think the ideas that they bring to the table are awesome, and we think that's cool to include and like get inspired by. And,
so that's kind of our way of just showing some love back to the stuff that gets us through our day. So
now, and I mean, I know a lot of the team that works on RWBY did also work on Red vs. Blue previously, which is, I mean, even more video game influenced if possible.
Just a little bit, just a little.
And was there anything that you guys learned from working on like Red vs. Blue or any other animation projects that you were then able to bring over to RWBY?
Absolutely. I mean, everything that we work on, we learn from. Even past volumes of RWBY, we learn from those on both a technical level, a storytelling level, all sorts of stuff. I'm trying to think of like specific things.
RWBY grew out of the work of RWBY pretty directly. Talking about Monty, he joined Rooster Teeth during RWBY Season 8, and his work essentially became the roots of custom animation as a subject inside of Rooster Teeth at all. So, he came on board and began to manipulate the Halo assets that we were getting from Microsoft and made the characters do all sorts of crazy new combat moves that informed the freelancer storyline for the next several years of the show. And then, as we were wrapping up Season 10, I think Monty was getting confident enough in, the production techniques that have been kind of figured out and how they've been applied to RWBY, where he's like, I think we can make an anime. And then he'd had the crazy dream that had the idea for the RWBY girls and their colors and whatnot, and he started pulling Miles and Carrie in and bouncing story ideas around, and then we all sort of rallied around it and kept going. So I mean, like again, it was Monty got Rooster Teeth's attention. The reason he got the job at Rooster Teeth was because he was doing video game inspired fan projects.
The Final Fantasy versus...
exactly. So he did Dead Fantasy. He did Haloid, which was Halo versus Metroid. No, we owe everything about our roots to video games when you think about it.
Okay, so then another question more specifically about the writing, because like you did mention about the tournament and how that was, the stadium was influenced by Pokemon, and a lot of this makes sense for video games, but it is a different type of writing. So, if you go into it thinking kind of like, oh, this is a tournament, and, it makes sense in video games, like, how do you then translate that over into more of the animation writing?
Well, I mean, it's all just kind of like trying to just establish the rules of everything. Like in an action movie, you're just kind of going to accept the fact that your character can get shot 7 times and fall from not 1 but 2 skyscrapers and still kill the bad guy in the end. It's just kind of something that comes along with the ride. And with RWBY, it being this sci-fi fantasy, like obviously action-inspired stuff, like the things like that, it's almost, people just kind of get it and they go with it. It's like, oh, these characters can make force fields? Awesome, cool. They have unique superpowers? Rad, I'm on board. It's a sniper rifle and a scythe? Excellent. So, I mean, I don't know. I've never really thought about it much. We just kind of all decided, like, yeah, this seems like it'll be cool, and never really looked back.
So, now also, with the animation style, RWBY has a very, like a kind of 3D, kind of 2D sort of style. Like, how does that really affect the animating that you do, particularly in the fight sequences?
Well, it's definitely been a learning experience. We've gone back and forth with the style. Whenever it's a full-on fight scene, we embrace the 3D. Especially Monty just would throw the camera around and as if it was just tied to a string and twirl it around and have people fighting. Just get wild with it and really embrace what 3D allows us to do that other traditional 2D animation can't. Like, that's where we should really show it off. And yeah, when it comes time for the more subtle performances that you'll see in like a dialogue scene, that's where we kind of had to get a little interesting. That was where we'd say like, okay, it's more, Red versus Blue, for instance, the 3D animation, the performances, very lifelike. You'll see the shoulder shrugs, you'll see characters sway as they talk, and you can see them breathe. But in anime, it's very pose-based, and it was kind of trying to find that sweet spot when it came to working on the more subtle non-action scenes of like, we still use motion capture software to get that initial performance to help out, to kind of lay down a base layer. But honestly, a lot of our animators will then rip tons of that data out because it's unnecessary. It's too lifelike, it's too 3D, and we don't actually want that because with the kind of 2D aesthetic that we're trying to achieve, it becomes distracting.
I think that's a great way to put it. And it's a fun time right now because there's several different animation studios out there right now that are exploring using 3D CG to either do entire productions or at least accelerate what they're doing on the 2D side. And I think everyone recognizes the same questions, but each studio is answering some of those key questions a little bit differently per subject. And it's some of them play with frame rate, where they wanted to mimic the kind of slower frame rate of traditional hand-drawn animation, just because it's a nod to them. They think it's what the audiences are used to. But then it becomes this balancing act of, but if it's these 3D assets, then maybe that motion looks kind of weird or stuttery if you drop too many frames, or if you have the characters moving around too much while you're doing a kind of a lower frame rate. So then you make the motion look really smooth, and some people think that looks great, but then other people react to that as like, well, now it looks like a video game cutscene. And so we kind of have to keep tailoring all the boring under the hood stuff to the artistic needs of the moment, and with the ultimate goal of just, so long as it did what you wanted to do to your audience, then let's just call that the right answer and move on to the next scene.
Which is also a very video game way of thinking about it. Because like I've interviewed developers before, and there's so much stuff that they're like, yeah, it's like the under the hood, and like, you know, we knew we wanted to get from point A to point B, but then there's so much under the hood that happens in between, even though on the surface it just seems very basic and like very straightforward.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to get feedback from the RWBY audience over the years, because you know, ever since Volume 1, every year the goal is to raise the bar, do things better, try to go for some bigger things. All of us at the studio, including Monty, always felt that, you know, if you were going to repeat yourself, well, then that's boring, and what's the point? You should always be trying something new. So it's part of the RWBY experience to come back and have each volume look a little bit evolved over the last one.
How long do you guys think the show's going to go on for? Like, and I mean,
millions of years.
Because the current story arc seems like there is a definite end in sight. You know, it doesn't seem like one of those, you know, like supernatural where you're like, okay, so this is going to be happening for 50 years.
We're not exactly going One Piece on this thing. No. This has been a popular question this weekend. In general, yeah, so there is a definite end to Team RWBY's story arc. There has been since day one. We kind of knew the tentpole moments throughout the series and where we wanted these characters to go and what we wanted them to learn and go through. And, you know, it's an ever-changing conversation. Currently, we say probably somewhere between 10 to 12 volumes is if we were to kind of make a ballpark guess.
Yeah.
But the exciting thing is, you know, just because Team RWBY's story comes to an end doesn't mean we have to say goodbye to the world of Remnant. People really seem to lock on to this universe and everything that could possibly be within it, whether it be, you know, people making their own original characters or fan fiction and all that stuff. And, you know, the Legend of Korra proved that just because one story comes to an end doesn't mean you have to say goodbye to it. I mean, Star Wars, there's so many, you know, there's so many other great universes out there that people want to keep exploring. And if people are still interested in the world of Remnant by the time RWBY's story comes to an end, I don't see why we can't continue to check it out in another series, spin-off, whatever. Yeah,
one of the mottos at Rooster Teeth is that as long as the fans keep watching it, then we will do our best to keep making it. And everyone just seems to be really enjoying RWBY right now. So hopefully, you know, one way or another, the world of Remnant will keep going for years to come.
Okay, so now circling back around to the board game, because you just gave me an idea for another question, and I remember my original one. Does the board game really show any other aspects of that world that we, you know, that you don't really have the chance to see in the show?
The board game Combat Ready?
Yes.
It depends on your point of view. So, again, we had the board game that we showed in Volume 2, which was the kind of world-conquering, huge strategy game, and we think it would be fun to do that. Yeah, and I can't wait. You know, maybe someday we'll have the opportunity to do a game like that, and I can't imagine all the different kinds of opportunities for lore that we jam into that. With this one, we wanted this first game to be really attractive to fans of the action of the show. And so this will be more about getting people to think like the characters think, and you'll be able to kind of break down the beats of the game mechanics into the phases of how we choreograph our fights. But I think, so I mean, when you talk about that, you might get a little bit more detail about, you know, thinking about what, how some of the weapons work or what they might be useful for in certain situations. I guess that might kind of come into play. There is a stretch goal that that involves a character that's in a story from later years of RWBY that maybe we'll decide to introduce that character through the game. And you'll get to the fans will get to know that character for the first time by learning how they fight in Combat Ready, and then can look forward to seeing how they show up in the story later. So that was an idea that we're knocking around.
Okay, and are you guys planning to, like, is this game supposed to be like, you know, one and done kind of thing, or are you planning to keep expanding it, you know, because like once you have a good basis for the game, you know, conceivably, and I'm saying this without playing it, so I'm assuming you could, like, you know, conceivably add on other bits and pieces.
Some of the stretch goals, in fact, revolve around making available newer characters. So, I mean, the game is designed in such a way that we can add more combat teams and villains and support staff or support characters and, minions, like the more grim type that the bad guys can kind of use. And, so, I mean, like, it's absolutely designed with that in mind, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do that and keep the game alive at the time.
And now, are you guys planning to actually put this out into mass production, or
I'm sure that Rooster Teeth would love to do that. I would stay tuned for more details on how the strategy comes together. Right now, we wanted to know, did the fans want the game? Rooster Teeth. It turns out that the economics of making a board game are a little bit tricky, and the company wanted to have that conversation through Kickstarter with the fans to find out, is this something that we should do or not? And response so far has been an overwhelming yes, and so now we know for sure we're at least making the game. Now we need to take care of those fans that backed us and helped bring this game into existence, and then I'm sure that we'll kind of figure it out from there afterwards.
Okay, because we do have a tabletop gaming editor who I was talking to about this, and he said that based on the stretch goals and also based on the base amount that you guys were asking for, he was like, it seems like it's something that is planning not just for a limited edition for backers and a couple thousand extra copies of the game.
I think we just wanted to also make it accessible. I mean, we could have made the gold lined, hand painted, blah blah blah. There's a whole bunch of super fine quality approaches to production that the company could have gone for, but I think we just wanted to make something that a lot of people could just get in their hands and take around with them and go play, as opposed to making it the super expensive prestige set that only lives on your coffee table. I mean, it'd be cool to have that, don't get me wrong, maybe we'll do a super fancy special edition someday, but it's been neat to kind of see that we're finding the sweet spot through finding out what level the fans want to fund the game at, and that kind of tells us, okay, well then this is a good, nice quality for the game. But I think right now it's just more about we want to be competitive. That's the other thing. Even if we don't take it to mass market, I don't think that we want the fans to look at what they're getting for that price point and compare it to the things that they could go down to their local gaming store and get instead and go, oh man, why is Rooster Teeth charging so much for that? This is what I'm used to. So I think we didn't want to be obnoxious that way. So.
Okay, and now you said you guys are partnering with Arcane
Wonders. Yeah.
Yes. Why did you guys choose them to partner up with out of all the companies you could have chosen?
I think they, Partners had a good track record of making some cool board games and stuff.
Yeah.
That's more of a question for our games development.
Yeah, that's behind the scenes question for them, I suppose. But when we
they just came up to you guys and were like, hey.
No. We weren't in on the deal. So yeah. I mean, it was. Animation department is responsible for making sure that the game stays true to the voice of the story, and that the art looks like the characters from the show, and we can help advise on some world and weapon information that can kind of help them fill in the details of the game. But I'd heard that we were partnering with Arcane Wonders and looked up some of the stuff that they did, which I'd absolutely heard of, and I got friends who thought favorably of them. So I was glad to hear that they were one of the partners that we're talking to. And then once we actually got our hands on the game and could start test playing it, then it was clear that Games Team made the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. I think that's it for my questions. Unless you guys have anything else you'd like to add?
No, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, Volume 5 starts October 14th for our first subscribers, and then will be free to all other folks that visit roosterteeth.com 3 days later, and then 1 week afterwards for everybody on YouTube. But yeah, we're stoked for Volume 5. Hopefully people are going to enjoy it.
Yeah, and at the time of this conversation, there's just a couple of weeks left in the Kickstarter for Combat Ready. So if he can get you the actual end date to the Kickstarter.
October 30th.
October 30th is the last day that you can possibly back the game and get in on all the cool backer-specific perks. But yeah, so if people want to check it out, they should go to RWBYcombatready.com.
Okay, awesome. Thank you both so much.